Shalom. This is the 11th shiur on Sefer Vayikra, where we examine the machlokas between Rishonim on different psukim. This is a fascinating comment that we're going to see by the Ramban, in a machlokas between the Ramban and Rashi. And for you carnivores out there, you meat eaters, this will be particularly a tasty machlokas between the Rishonim. Okay, we're looking at Yud Zayin Gimel. This is Sedrat Acharei Mos. Yud Zayin Gimel. The pasuk states as follows: it says, "Ish mi beis Yisrael asher yishchat shor o kesef o eiz v'machaneh o asher yishchat b'chutz v'machaneh." So it says that a person is going through the laws of slaughtering, and it says that any man in Bnei Yisrael, and it's not just a man; it's referring to a person who slaughters an ox, a lamb, or a goat inside the camp, meaning Bnei Yisrael were camped in the desert. So, or who slaughters an ox outside of the camp, and that's what it's referring to. And it goes on and states halachos. Rashi here on the pasuk, if you look at Rashi, pasuk Gimel Divrei Maschil Asher Yishchat Shor O Kesef, on the phrase that says who slaughters an ox or a lamb, says Mugdash Nekasav Medaber. This is referring to meat that was offered that's kadosh, that was offered as part of a korban. Shneimar Lakriv Korban B'Mincha Chutz LaAzara, outside of the Azara, meaning not outside of the camp of Bnei Yisrael state, but outside of the camp of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Okay, that's Rashi. Rashi says that the meat is referring to the meat of Kodesh, meat of a korban. Now, the Ramban takes a totally different approach, and this is a fascinating Ramban. Buckle your seatbelts, as Rabbi Yudin used to say, or he still does say, and follow along here. This is pasuk Beis El Haron B'Navo Kol Bnei Yisrael. Says the Ramban, Bavur Hayosa Parshas Harla Akriv korbonos Bo Moed. Since this pasuk talks about the warning that you should give a korbonos only in the Mishkan. In other words, you couldn't do a korban right outside your tent; it had to be in the Mishkan. Yazir Kohanim Sheim Akrivin a korban Shlei Akrivin B'chutz. This pasuk comes to warn the Kohanim: don't offer any sort of korban outside of the Mishkan area. And so too, from Bnei Yisrael, they also shouldn't, even without a Kohen, they shouldn't go ahead and shecht outside the area of the Mishkan. Here's the fascinating one. You ready for this? In the desert, the Jews were not allowed to eat meat unless it was the meat of a korban. You couldn't just have a hamburger. That hamburger had to come from a korban. Any time So therefore, anytime you wanted to have meat for dinner, you would have to bring the animal to the Mishkan, and only at the Mishkan could you go ahead and then have your hamburger. First of all, you'd slaughter the animal, you'd offer it as a korban, and the pieces of meat that you're allowed to have, you'd be able to eat. And certain parts would get burnt up and as a korban. And then you could eat the meat in a kosher way. And if you would slaughter somewhere else and it wouldn't be part of a korban, so then you'd be chayev kares. And this is referring to anybody that eats. This is referring to the prohibition of eating meat out of desire. Right? And what makes this meat permissible is once it's been offered as a korban to Hashem. Afterwards, the Torah goes on and tells you that you're not allowed to build an altar outside of the area. Only at the entrance of the Mishkan. And this places all shchita. That's the only time you're able to have slaughter. All shchita must be taking place inside the area of the mizbeach. And therefore, in Sefer Dvarim, it says that you're allowed to have this meat once you've crossed the Jordan River, which actually cool enough is like right over there from where I'm sitting right now. But right, and then at this place that Hashem chooses, you're allowed to offer korbanos, meaning in the Beis Hamikdash. And Torah again warns us that once you come into Eretz Yisrael, you can't have a mizbeach where you can offer korbonos anywhere you want. Kim b'makom, rak in the place that Hashem chooses, meaning Har Moriah, Har Abayis, where the Beis HaMikdash is in Yerushalayim. Right, so there's a prohibition of eating, of shechting and eating outside of the mikdash, right? At the time of the Beis HaMikdash. But in Eretz Yisrael, you were allowed to have regular meat. Once you come into Eretz Yisrael, and once the Beis HaMikdash is set up, and once there's a permanent altar set up, so then you're allowed to have regular meat. You're allowed to have hamburger. In other words, you could shecht an animal in your backyard, and all the meat is for you. You don't have to offer any of it as a korban. So only the korbonos have to be offered on the mizbeach, but all other animals don't have to. What's the difference? Why is it that in the desert you had to? The only way you could eat meat was if it was part of a korban. But now that we're inside Eretz Yisrael and a Beis HaMikdash is set up, you can have meat whenever you want, because it wasn't so difficult when we were in the midbar and we lived in close proximity to each other for everybody to shecht an animal only and bring it to the Mishkan. It wasn't such a far walk to bring it to the Mishkan and offer a korban. But okay, but once our borders are extended and we live all throughout the land of Israel, it's not easy to tell somebody who lives up in the Galil, hey, you should bring your animal down to Yerushalayim if you want to eat meat. That's a very far walk. In fact, most people would only do it 3 times a year for the regel, for the Chag. So it's not so easy. So therefore, Hashem allowed, once we moved into Eretz Yisrael, Hashem allowed us to go ahead and offer and eat meat wherever we were in Eretz Yisrael. So fascinating machlokes. According to Rashi, here we have that one opinion as to how to understand that the meat that we're talking about is mukdashin, is talking about kadosh meat, and the Ramban has another interesting way of understanding this pasuk. 2 ways are fascinating in terms of how much they disagree. And, of course, the real chachma in this debate is only going to come with your analysis, which I cannot wait to read. Shabbat Shalom. Say Shabbat Shalom, just Shalom. Unless it's Friday. Then it is Shabbat Shalom.